We've had a great day together and we continue to do so. My name is Roger Schrader. I'm on the faculty here at Catholic Theological Union. I spoke yesterday. I'm back today as the moderator for this session. As we begin, I have a few announcements. One is, Ava Solomon said there's some materials over here to my right on the floor. If people would like to pick some of those spirituality materials, feel free to do so. Secondly, Steve Judd this morning mentioned about this concert at the Art Institute tomorrow, music that was done in the Jesuit reductions. I have some further information on that with details starting at 2 o'clock. So if anyone would like that, you can see me after this and I can share that with you, further information. So today we are using technology to do this in a very creative way. We have our two speakers. Our first speaker is Isolde Paillalef, and she unfortunately was not able to come because of a complication with the visa at the airport. So as you see, she's joining us via Skype. You have a copy of the text in English on your chair. There will not be another translation, so you need to follow that. That is your English access to what she's going to be sharing with us. If I can say a little bit about Isolde, she is the author of When a Flower is Reborn, The Life and Times of a Mapuche Feminist. She's also the executive secretary for the Office of Mapuche Pastoral Ministry, the Diocese of San Jose in Chile. She is a leader within the Mapuche indigenous rights movement in Chile for the last 30 years. She brings much experience here with us. So she's going to be speaking and via Skype at this time.
Muy buenos días a todos. Agradezco la oportunidad de poder conversar frente a ustedes. Mi nombre es Isolde Reuque Paillalef. Soy una mujer mapuche cristiana. El tema que nos reúne hoy día es el tema sobre la espiritualidad y la interculturalidad que vivimos los pueblos indígenas. Son grandes temas que junto a ustedes podemos ir conversando. Los pueblos indígenas a estas alturas hacen un llamado a la Iglesia Católica para ser reconocidos en forma real, considerando su cultura, su espiritualidad, sus protocolos y sus derechos propios. Quiero hacer un aporte a este encuentro sobre los derechos propios, al hacer un aporte presentándoles mi experiencia de ser mujer, mapuche, dirigente social. Decir que no soy periodista ni socióloga, sin embargo mi vida ha transcurrido entre la observación y la construcción de una buena comunicación. Al aceptar este desafío, pensé en compartir mi experiencia de ser mapuche católica y al pensarlo así se me vino a la mente un lonco, que es un jefe de comunidad, un huerquén, un comunicador tradicional de mi pueblo. Por lo mismo agradezco a Benechen yo estar entre ustedes. A menudo resulta difícil retomar el camino de lo vivido, de lo que he aprendido en este mundo. Hablar de uno mismo, estar frente a ustedes, es un nuevo desafío para mí. Miro y veo el interesante que es el tema frente a mi experiencia de vida como mujer perteneciente al pueblo mapuche, identificándome como mujer cristiana, católica, mujer chilena trabajadora. Nací en una comunidad a la usanza tradicional. En el parto mi madre fue atendida por una labuentuchefe, hierbatera especialista, y entre chefe, diríamos la matrona. Este recuerdo de mi niñez no es claro. Los recuerdos son como pasajes que representan hechos importantes. Soy la mayor de las mujeres vivas de 7 hermanos. Mi madre fue madre en 9 oportunidades. Con ella aprendí el sentido de la responsabilidad, el cuidado de los hermanos menores, realizar labores en la huerta, el cuidado de los animales. Fui una niña feliz en contacto con la naturaleza. Aprendí el significado de las plantas, donde ellos construían una familia. Yo asumí la responsabilidad de ser la mayor de mis hermanos, ayudando en las labores del campo. Recuerdo a mi padre que siempre me repetía que debía mirar bien cómo se hacía el trabajo con la tierra, el cuidado de los animales. También mi madre me decía, y todavía me dice, que debo observar bien lo que hacen otros, para después repetir sobre todo lo que se refiere al aprendizaje del arte textil, el cuidado de las hierbas medicinales. En este aprendizaje no se hacen muchas preguntas, se observa mucho y todo se hace a conciencia. Esto se conoce en el mundo de las ciencias sociales como metodología del aprender haciendo. En mi niñez y juventud no entendía mucho lo que mis padres eran y hacían. Mi padre era lonco de López, jefe de la comunidad, y mi madre hija de lonco. Una vez que salí de la casa, pude entender y resignificar lo que hacía mi padre. Todas las mañanas al nacer el día era su petición, oración, junto al pozo, lugar donde emanaba el agua. Veía que el agua caía como cascada entre sus dedos. El regalo de la ramita de gualde, roble, conocido en primavera, las oraciones en el sembrado, las oraciones con la lluvia, las conversaciones que él tenía con los árboles y los animales, como si fueran otras personas. Eso es lo que hace que uno entienda la estrecha relación que tenemos como pueblo con la naturaleza. Recuerdos de esta experiencia están en mi memoria, en mis prácticas diarias. Mi participación en el Villatún se hacía cada vez más significativa para mí y para mis padres. En el Villatún, ayudando a mi madre con los quehaceres domésticos, tales como el mudai, la bebida tradicional, la sopaipilla, que es el pan frito, la comida para las familias visitantes, el cuidado del fuego, el tratamiento de los residuos, tanto en casa como en el Villatúe, lugar donde se realiza la ceremonia en el campo. Aprendí que los restos de comida no debían ser profanados. Fui aprendiendo, participando en el baile, el purún, haciendo el pan de la danza y después ser la ayudante de mi padre con el cultrum, el tambor tradicional, taírse como instrumentista. Todas esas prácticas las mantengo en mis encuentros cotidianos. Mi identidad de mujer mapuche cristiana católica, a menudo me preguntan quién soy, por qué soy mapuche y católica. Me identifico, soy dirigente social, mujer, mapuche, cristiana y católica. No fácil de entender por muchos. Uno no aprecia lo diferente cuando vive en la familia, pero cuando va a la escuela o en la instrucción formal, vive lo diferente. Lo que en la ciudad es muy distinto a lo que se hace en el campo. Hace más o menos 50 años, uno vive lo diferente desde lo simple a lo más complejo de la cotidianidad. Todo cambia en la escuela. Hay que callar, hay que aprender a escribir. Ahí uno se va dando cuenta que la construcción de las frases van hacia otro lado. Que uno piensa en mapuche y debe escribir en castellano. Los profesores siempre pusieron su énfasis en aquello que quedaba mal construido o mal redactado. Nos criticaban por la mala pronunciación, pero nunca el profesor se puso en el lugar de uno, nunca el profesor cuestionó que estaban tratando con una cultura diferente. Mi identidad cultural recién florece desde mi ser después de la enseñanza básica a la media, porque ahí me enfrenté a lo desconocido, en las diferencias por trabajo, por estudios superiores. Como persona sentí discriminación. Pareciera que había que aprender todo de fácil. Descubrí que en el aprendizaje mapuche lo que se aprende es profundo, viene del alma y de la cultura. Es una cuestión de fe y de conocimiento puro. En este sentido, como mujer mapuche, el encuentro con el cristianismo también de lo propio de la cultura mapuche. Aunque el mapuche escribe la Iglesia ha reconocido en varias ocasiones los buenos verdaderos de los pueblos indígenas, las comunidades católicas no están preparadas para acoger, claro, entre nosotros. Se cuestiona desde el modo de hacer oración hasta la demonización de que me creen como Dios. Y Dios cristiano es el único. Pero la diferencia entre la oración cristiana y la mapuche, donde el que es cristiano debe aprender y dar sentido a lo más simple de las oraciones, repetir las fórmulas establecidas y pasar muchos momentos. Por las fuerzas naturales y mundo que se ve, eso lo relaciona con el Espíritu Santo, que se busca desde un lado. La oración mapuche es muy distinta, es todo espontáneo. La oración va saliendo desde el corazón, lo que se siente, porque la naturaleza mueve lo que se ve. Eso lo relaciona con el Espíritu Santo, que se busca desde el lado del bueno, la fuerza, el poder, que mueve lo que se está viviendo, hace tener conciencia que existe un ser superior, que está. La fuerza de la naturaleza te enseña a respetar a todos los seres de la tierra, pero solo existe que existen Dios para el cristiano. La persona se concibe como parte de la tierra. Cultural. De la historia de la creación del hombre en la tierra, que existe la posibilidad que uno puede detenerse para
Because of the technical difficulty, what we're going to do is I'm going to read it in English. We're on page 3, the second last paragraph, starting with in contrast. We just have to deal with the situation we have. Huh?
Can you read from what does the Mapuche do?
Okay, I'll move up to the second paragraph on page 3. What does the Mapuche do? That's when we begin to lose the contact. What does the Mapuche do? In Christianity, we are taught to first go to know our religion, the sacred Judeo-Christian scriptures, where there is no room for the Mapuche worldview. Catholicism's emphasis on preserving what is characteristic of the Mapuche culture is a process that the Church has been living and reshaping with the passing of time. In this regard, thanks to the work of the Holy Spirit, several popes in the Church have begun to recognize the elements that unite the indigenous peoples with the Catholic world, more so than the elements that separate us. At the beginning, we received a lot of criticism for our way of praying, and in this process of questioning if God alone exists. The Christian, we had to learn and make sense of the simplest prayers, repeating them like a parrot. We had to spend much time of our lives trying to feel the Holy Spirit in some powerful way in order to be witnesses of faith. In contrast, in Mapuche prayer, everything is spontaneous. Prayer comes from the heart, from what it feels, with the strength of nature that moves what is seen. This is the Holy Spirit that the Christians speak of, the new one, the force, which moves what we are living, makes us aware that there is a supreme being who is always by our side. The forces of nature teach us to respect all the earth's beings, but the only one who exists is mentioned, God in Christianity. We learn that we are part of the earth and must live with all that is created. Therefore, when a person is born, it is a moment of happiness. It is a manifestation of the nekni, the prolonging of the history of humankind's creation on earth. Some may wonder if we have time to analyze the different viewpoints which give strength to the Mapuche, values that reinforce our personality, our everyday life. It is a continual process, a permanent process. We are learning every day, creating knowledge and spreading it. There is not a moment to stop and philosophize when faced with life situations. It is a continual learning process, an invitation to be alert always with all our senses, including the interpretation of our dreams or what nature tells us each day. With the passing of time and in the different roles that I have had to perform, I have been an instrument for spreading Mapuche spirituality as well as the practice of the rites that are part of our ancestral culture. First by self-identifying with them, and then by participating in different activities that occur within the family, in the community, and in the daily tasks that I have faced in my work. I have had to direct and adapt the Mapuche protocol to a reality outside the community, to groups of people with different creeds and political visions. The goal is to show the non-Mapuche world the value of Mapuche spirituality by giving the Mapuche the importance they deserve, with the respect for their ancestral authorities and for the elders in their communities. From the Mapuche point of view, we face discrimination and misunderstanding about our life and faith. We need to live with a clear idea of what being Mapuche means from a Catholic Christian perspective, where we are all children of the same God. The most difficult part is to face viewpoints that question my way of living or my self-identifying as a Mapuche Catholic Christian. We experience criticism and disregard for our ways of living our religion as if it were a popular syncretism that crushes freedom of thought. In recent years, the Catholic Church has recognized the Mapuche people as different from globalized society in their worldview, their language, their religion, and their characteristic way of cultivating a close relationship between human beings and nature. For example, the Ecclesial Province of Southern Chile issued a pastoral letter in March of 1979 in favor of the Mapuche people, promoting Mapuche culture through consultation and empowerment, through the defense of their rights and the formation of their leaders. The Gulatunes is a religious ceremony that is practiced both in an individual and in a communitarian way. It has 4 parts, and each part has 4 movements, and that lasts for 2 days. I'm not going to read this part because I'll certainly mispronounce the words. You can see it there. Let it be a prayer that is done every time a person is able. Walatan, a communitarian religious ceremony. Urun, a dance. Being born, living out a particular way, custom, and culture, and then seeing something different when you go to school, this changes everything. You need to be quiet, you need to learn to write, and then you realize that the sentences you are putting together the opposite way. You think in Mapuche and write in Spanish. This is not well constructed. You are criticized for not speaking well, for writing incorrect sentences. Here you see the identity in the way culture blossoms, in the way a person feels when faced with discrimination. You need to learn everything anew, and that is good. And what you knew before is not good. It is the past. If you are not a Christian, you are criticized for your way of doing things. Who is Nuwatan? Only God exists. In Christianity, one needs to learn everything, but in Mapuche culture, everything is spontaneous. What you feel comes from inside, what the Spirit moves you to do, what you are living. You have a supreme being who is always at your side. The forces of nature teach you to respect all the earth's beings, but only Netchin exists. You are part of the earth, and you have to coexist with all that is created. For this reason, when a person is born, it is a moment of happiness. It is a manifestation of Netchin. The church sees and feels the last 60 years. The church sees and feels how the identity of Mapuche people has been crushed. Their personal and cultural identity has been crushed. What can we do? As a Catholic Church, we need to be present and to offer the gospel as a liberating force, motivated by the clear awareness of a people's identity, their profound faith, and a dialogue with their culture, strengthening their values and announcing Jesus. The church needs to accompany, walk with the Mapuche people during an era of change that is affecting them, in order to respond to the cultural reality in a particular geographical context that makes up part of the Diocese of San Jose de Temuco. The church should have as a goal that Mapuche communities and leaders receive an intercultural and integral formation in an encounter with the living Christ, so that a missionary attitude may emerge. This mission means giving witness to Jesus Christ and to the church, strengthening the spirit of communion with the communities with their own identity, offering spaces for prayer and material for intercultural reflection in order to reinforce their integral formation while maintaining their Mapuche worldview. Advance and promote inspiration within communities through intercultural, comprehensive training from a clearly Christian perspective, through 2 lines of action. First, based on the gospel. Second, based on the church's social doctrine, choosing the themes that truly affect Mapuche communities, such as their own identity, the importance of the earth, their own methods of production, their education and empowerment as tools of personal development. To this end, some elementary schools and a high school have been established to support such integral participation, such as an elementary school in the towns of La Imperial and Cavarino in southern Chile's Choctaw Municipality. Apologies for my mispronunciations. Today in Choctaw, the Guacolda Vocational Technical High School offers an intercultural Mayan and Mapuche education to students coming from different communities within Chile's Biobío and Ayocuna regions. Anything? In the city of Lacuima, there is an elementary school that offers a Mayan education and continuous pursuit of the Bohunche identity. Bohunche means people of the piñón, or pine nut tree, and is a name given to Mapuche people who live in the Andes of central Chile, along with the Biobío River, a few hours away from the border of Argentina. In September 24th, 1962, the Indigenous Institute Foundation was established. This foundation works intensely in the social arena and has a clear approach to evangelization based on Mapuche wisdom. It is working on Mapazugan, the Mapuche language, texts such as songs, conversations, and the Mapuche welcome dance or ceremony, known as Tali. One of many sorrows is the reality that the Mapuche people are living. In 1978, as a reaction to several abuses of rights, the church intervened in defense of the Mapuches. In this regard, the people of Temuco, Sergio, made an urgent appeal to leaders of Mapuche Christian communities, offering his house as a meeting place to reflect on topics related to this situation. The theme was the earth, as well as a possible new law that was provoking some concerns. The division of land favoring those who were occupying it. The law meant to put an end to land owning problems. The formation of tourist centers, deforestation, and industrialization. These were points that created confusion. Some were in disagreement with them, and others totally in favor, because there was a lot of propaganda by the government, offering to pay those who were absent, and offering land ownership to those who lived on the land and worked on it. On September 12, 1978, at 9 a.m., one after another, people began to fill the retreat center in Temuco. They were leaders of communities in other places in diocesan territory. Bishop Contreras and Deacon Rodolfo Canas gave the welcoming and closing address. The rest of the day's program was the attendees' responsibility. They elected a board and gave themselves the urgent task of rebuilding traditional organizations, strengthening traditional authorities, and involving the effective leaders of the time. They highlighted the fact that they should have their own tools and strategies and should use the Mapuche language in their organizational methods, in their burial ceremonies, and in performing an ancient sacred Mapuche game played with a stick and ball, similar to field hockey. These are all occasions that provide the opportunity to deal with issues from the Mapuche point of view. Out of this event, the Mapuche Cultural Centers of Chile were born. The church supported them with technical consultation through the Indigenous Institute Foundation and its professional staff, together with other NGOs, such as Quakers, the Emmaus Movement. This then reached the regions which had a greater Mapuche population, from the city of Concepcion into the south, and including Santiago. By 1980, there were 1,500 communities that had been visited and reorganized. The military government had such a desire to divide us that it formed an organization and gave us space in our own headquarters. It was directed by Juan Necomán, a lawyer from the Institute for Indigenous Development. Sergio Liempi, an evangelical Christian professor from the city of Trigun in the region, And Mayor Raymond Garucha. I just continued. Nowadays, the members of the Mapuche Pastoral Commission seek to incorporate themselves into communities. They accompany their brothers and sisters from an intercultural point of view, valuing what has been built over time with respect and trust. Now, in conclusion, to promote the announcement and explicit witness of the gospel and of the person of Jesus, the Son of God, who died and was risen, that they might have life and have it abundantly. John 10:10. Second, to discover and acknowledge the seeds of the word present in the tradition and culture of the Mapuche people, valuing their worldview and their love for the earth, welcoming their values and traditions that enrich their faith and the life of their communities. To promote a style and methodology of evangelization which is welcoming, simple, and fraternal, and stays close to families through meetings in their homes and communities, touching their own reality. Fourthly, to strengthen the social doctrine of the church. Let us express our thanks to
Muy bien, muchas gracias.
Okay.
Si no está bien. Okay.
Okay, the second part of our presentation is with Jaime Bascuñán from Chile. Jaime and I have known each other for 25 years, going back to around 1990, 89, 90, something like that. He is also a graduate here of CTU. He was here on 2 occasions for 2 different degrees, and he also finished his doctorate of ministry here in what year? 2009. He did a lot of work in the Archdiocese of Chicago in preparation for pastoral ministry, especially amongst the deacons, and Spanish-speaking deacons at that time. He's also been involved in many other activities. You can look at his bio in the materials for the speakers. That gives you a lot more background in that way. It's really an honor for me to introduce you, Jaime. I never thought 25 years ago that I'd be introducing you in this way. So, welcome.
Good morning, Esther. Good morning. I'm very glad to be here to participate in this Congress and to share a little bit about my experience and to be among some old faces, not in ages, but in knowledge. And it's a privilege to be able to share a little bit about my experience in the last 5 years that I have been in Chile. After I was here for 22, so I went back on 2011, and I started living in the area of Temuco, where I was born, actually. So I never realized, or I never thought that I was going to be back there and to work and be in connection and dialogue with the Mapuches who were there when I was born, but I never had the opportunity, or perhaps the openness, to be in that connection with the communities. So I'm sorry for all of this connection problem that we had. I thought that I would have practiced my English, after 5 years I've been out. So, and also it's a good experience for you to listen to the accent. It's about trying to say, all of us have an accent, right? So please bear with me the mispronunciation sometime, and perhaps as Isolde said, as I wrote this in English, perhaps as I'm doing more stuff in Spanish, I do the construction also in Spanish. So let's see what happens. Okay, I would like to begin recognizing that this is a very humbling for me to be here representing Chile. this Congress. I have to say that this is one experience out of many, and perhaps there are other experiences that are more meaningful and stronger than mine. But the presentation represents a dialogue work done by a community of people, Christians, Mapuches, and no-Mapuches, which has summarized, I have summarized in this paper. The idea of this was a different mode of presentation. It was more like a dialogue, so I had to improvise and change a little bit my presentation here. And I had to cut a few things, but the idea is that I would like to present a project that we are working on the university, Catholic University in Temuco, which is an intercultural, interreligious dialogue between the Mapuche Christians and the rest of the church, but in a very small setting. So during this presentation, I will try to develop a theological reflection on a particular experience of intercultural dialogue between Christian spirituality and Mapuche spirituality, in the context of a mesa de diálogo, a round table, that had been formed in the university under the umbrella of the Theology department. All Christians, but diverse. That is the table that we have. Being from a Latino culture and living and working in the US in a cross-cultural context, and having me working in different situations and different settings, struggling with the church structure even here in Chicago, it gave me a particular perspective and sensitivity to identify a key element or aspect for an experience of a real and meaningful dialogue and encounter with the other. The other here is as individual or group that is to be recognized as a different or diverse of your own culture. As Isolde said before, it is when you are in face with the other culture that is different than yours, you start thinking about who are you, and that is the experience of perhaps many of you here. The Catholic University of Temuco is located in the Araucanía region, in the south part of Chile. This is a region where the Mapuche people live, great part of the population live. Today there are many areas where the Mapuche community live called reducciones indígenas. Limited land territory left for the community after the land was given to the colonos, who settled there at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century. Something similar to the reservations here in the US. One of the key elements in the mission of the university is to serve within this regional context, which is diverse culturally and religiously, which means to be attentive to this intercultural reality. Consequently, the university supports internal projects toward this endeavor as a very specific and unique contribution to the region and the country. Perhaps this is one of the few universities that have a very diverse and most diverse population, student population, where close to 14–15% of the students are Mapuches. And that is a big challenge for the university, how to accompany them in the process. Two disclaimers before I continue. First, my presentation does not intend to present in detail the reality of the Mapuche in the historical process. Second, this does not represent necessarily the attitude of the Chilean church in relating to the Mapuches. We can say that this is an experience of dialogue, opening the ground to rethink our theology of church and mission, in a way that pastoral work is understood as a dialogue in mutuality, or mission as intercultural dialogue. 2 years ago, a roundtable group was formed. People from the Mapuche culture, the academia, and the church are the participant members of this group, who monthly gather to find ways to dialogue about spirituality from both culture and church experiences. As we share our experiences of being Christian Catholic and Mapuche Christian Catholics, we plan to gather with a wider group in a more diverse group in a symposium. In that occasion, Michelle was invited to come facilitate some dialogue also from his experience of intercultural dialogue. We invited representatives from the Mapuche communities, people from the Mapuche ministry, faculty staff, and people interested in the intercultural dialogue. 26 people gathered for 3 days. Some of the objectives of this symposium were to reflect possible dynamic of intercultural, interreligious dialogue in the Araucanía, to bring to light issues that can be obstacles to dialogue, to deepen bridges themes from culture and spirituality that might facilitate this dialogue. At the end, to systematize our reflections and publish them eventually, so this can help others to dialogue within their own originality. The format of this gathering was a round circle of sharing not only stories and reflections, but dance, food, silence, and prayer. We didn't have long talk like we have had this today. I'm not saying that it's bad, but it's different. Namely, we wanted to share not just from the spoken language, but from gestures, symbols, prayer, and dance incorporated in the dialogue. We wanted to reflect with the whole person, to say, de una forma integral, from a very integral way. As we began the dialogue, the roundtable dialogue, we all agree we need some conditions to be able to hear each other. We began presenting our basic rules to listen to each other, suspending judgment of previous experiences of dialogue. As people said when they came in, they said, well, we had so many times dialogues and conversations and nothing happened. You know, everything continued the same. So why we're here again? That was the main concern. One more table, what for? So we're tired of this. I guess some of you have the same experiences. This is why I see some smiles around it. So the idea was to be open to express each other in freedom and honesty about the expectations of being together for these 3 days. As each person was introducing him or herself, it was a clear realization that at the moment of sharing with one another culture, we might feel inadequate, clumsy, say torpes. Doesn't feel right in sharing with the other, feel very clumsy, and even fearful to share about oneself. We named that experience, and that was an important starting point to undertake the sharing time together. And after we recognized that, we start dancing. We did something different so we can warm up a little bit. This implied an interior disposition to be open and explore the one's journey, both personal and communal, as culture. It is the realization of our own transcendence when we need to explore what is in our identity and experience of life in order to present ourselves to others. That is humbling and requires being vulnerable to exposition. It requires authenticity and genuine concern to being able to encounter the other. We come to a common understanding that a place and a space where we are is a sacred place, as we share our life and God's Spirit and wisdom among us. We should listen with respect and reverence to each other. That was the orientation that we give ourselves, and we understood as we gathered together. That's initial sharing. As those present shared their experience, faces were more than just faces. Each person felt heard and appreciated in their sharing, favoring a great understanding of history and processes that were oppressive, and the meaning as human being and culture. The first and the most important barrier came out in the stories were those of discrimination and misunderstanding, and others that it was even called racism in their experiences. Discriminated by being different, less educated, poor, too relaxed, lazy, or just different, not like us. Sounds familiar? Racism was a word that had been summarized in this experience. The reality that nobody named, but that is real in many encounters and structures where Mapuche live and are. We encounter. These are some of the elements that facilitate the dialogue. I would like to just enumerate them. The unconditional and open disposition to welcome the other. The restore to coming closer to each other in a circle, looking to each other, finding the window of the eye. Each participant made a real effort to come out and encounter the other, as each person welcomed the other. Each person was invited to relativize the prejudices, to be flexible of rigidities and dogmatism of possessing the truth, or dogmatism of possessing the truth. In this regard, to become vulnerable and let the other move us from our deepest conviction. The need to look at our past, to heal and find path for new future and open dialogue, to remain in the past, not to remain in the past. We become more aware of the importance of the historical way, which could become obstacle for dialoguing with one another. For instance, the Mapuche people made an effort to assimilate to dominant culture, as Isolde said in the school, forced them to learn the official language and disregarding their own, and to be educated. We share experiences of what was vital and meaningful in each cultural relationship, Mapuche and Winca, as people in Mapuche are called. The interiority to the exteriority, the sense of the sacred, the inclusivity in all aspects of life, diversity and harmony, all the different aspects that Roberto spoke this morning, they are very much in this here. The experience of the dances and circle was an important dynamic to see our bodies being placed in common place with the music, democratic and horizontal, finding together the rhythm. The body is our first reality where we experience the differences, the steps, the clumsiness, and the support and that all give us as we dance together to visualize the possibilities and not only to tolerate but to integrate the differences. In the dynamic of dialogue, the symbols and gestures were valued as we communicate with each other. In other words, we were open to learn from each other despite the difference and past wounds. At the end of the first day, we really saw the openness in sharing and the flexibility that people have in their sharing. I'm not saying that everything was fine, that everything was totally open to share, but at least it was a good disposition to enter into this dialogue. We have found ourselves in front of the other with respect and appreciation. We have recognized and put a name to a different situation we have experienced in relationship to those from another culture. The participants agree that an experience like this was not something they were used to do, to come together and to listen to each other. They said, something is happening when we share. We discover we enter into a dynamic of internal movement, even when to move causes insecurity. That implies to move into new images of God, nature, spirit, knowledge, or saberes, and to reflect on assumptions and to be reflexive on our practices of encountering the other. What has been our past experience in encountering the other? How do we see the other as other? What is happening to us in this encounter? Something was happening there. There was awareness. The image that came from this experience of dialogue is the one that we are apprentices. Somos aprendices. In a dialogue, we are always apprentices. The image of the apprentice gives us a sense of a constant learners in practice. In the practice, we acknowledge that we learn by listening to the stories and memories. We are involved or auto-implicated. It is me who is there, from both sides. We put ourselves in the place of the other. We call also empathy, right? We know perhaps a dialogue now with the gospel values, the gospel dynamic. We know that the gospel is not without culture and cannot happen without dialogue with a particular culture. It is expressed and takes form in dialogue with the culture in all its dimensions. In this way, we need to understand the gospel, the good news, as process of God's self who dialogue with humanity, with the very gift that God has given each people. These gifts are found in the life and culture of all people. Then theology, in this respect, is the process of finding and reflecting God in the life of the people as a pure gift. So we need to rethink the theology of the church. In the printing here, the pages didn't come right. Okay. We need to rethink the theology of the church. From theology of mission, we give the purpose to the church, understanding mission as encounter and dialogue. This space of mutual conversation provides us an opportunity to rethink about how a reconciliation can be possible from that experience of cultural and religious colonization, something that already we have heard in other presentations. Yes, religion, the church, has been caused of violence and imposition, not only by providing an image of God, but by not recognizing their own experience of life. Religion and spirituality. Religion in a broader sense, not in the institutional way. Basically, we have come short to recognize the way of how God can be manifested in the dynamic of diversity of the cultures in every human being. This experience has marked the identity of each group, the church as one on the one side and the Mapuche on the other. From the time of the conquest until today, the identity has been formed in a context of oppression, forcing Mapuches to adapt to models and structure of the church and civilization. From the part of Christianity, always this has been an asymmetrical relationship. One of the effects of this is that the Mapuche religious and spiritual practices have not been recognized or accepted until very recent. And we can speak more about that, but in a very halfway. We accept, but let's do it for later. So we need to keenly be aware of that the gospel and the church, in many cases, has contributed, manipulated, and disregard culture to impose the gospel message in a cultural package, not as a good news that unfold God's presence and grace, and therefore that do not encounter the other. This implies the awareness that God also speaks in other culture, and God's Spirit is in all creation, not just in the church. Looking at the experience of Jesus, he looked at the reality, the life of the one he encountered. And from that reality he spoke and evoked new meanings. The encounter with Zacchaeus, for instance, the woman at the well, the centurion. All of these encounters were invited to see it in a different way by being encountered in their own experience and reality of life. The key challenge beyond the doctrinal and heretical realm is how we recognize God or the experience of God, especially in the culture and life of the indigenous people. The experience of the Mapuche people to reassure their identity has been to become more fundamentalistic about their culture as a way of enchanting themselves about their ancestry. They have done this process to go back to the source, how to find the kimun, the wisdom, the saber that is in the tradition. Yes, Isolde, you hear me. The relationship between the Western culture and the church have been one of the power and domination, subordination and superiority, not equals. Their understanding of diversity implies complementarity, possibility of life. Complementarity is a possibility of life. This reality is more evident in the new generations of Mapuches. Their reality is already diverse and cruel for them. They have new consciousness about their culture, and the reality is already intercultural, especially those who live in the cities, in the urban areas. As Christians, we also need to answer this question. We have to ask ourselves in terms of diversity, what does it mean to be a Christian? We have been socialized to be something that exclude the other. We have been socialized that we have the truth. That blocks us to see plurality within this Christian form identity. Isn't that a rigid way to conceive being a Christian? As Catholic, what does it mean to be universal? This might give us a clue to be attentive to Christ and commitment to the gospel, where God is manifested in what is diverse and unique as a sign of God's creative self. But what is our image of God? What is the image of Christ that we believe? How do we interpret Jesus' message? Our actions will come from that belief. The interreligious dialogue appears as an academic interest, but in practice, these have not been developed very much. They have been developed more in the basis. They have been developed in small communities, in relationships, but from the top down, it has been very difficult to do, as again, all the presentations have pointed out. From part of the people in ministry and theologian, this has been very high. It has been a very high price. We're afraid to say something. I'm not sure what I'm saying here is going to be difficult to hear over there. So we have to be cautious how we do these reflections, which are part of our tradition. It's not something crazy. So these activities seem as suspicious and almost dangerous. The position then is of superiority and power. We have the truth, and we have to say that truth to others so they can learn and be educated. So this dialogue, we learn that requires this cultural reciprocity of cultural symmetry. Instead, the history of seeing the other has been marked by words like idolatry, paganism, no complete. In fact, critically, the church has seen a bad process of evangelization, pointing out the need for new evangelization, with the intention of inculturation. But even this term, even with the term of inculturation, there is a problem. That implies that there is a sense of superiority, even, that you have to inculturate something. That you have to bring something in, and you have something and the other doesn't have much. There's more about that. I'm not going to go into that. Okay. Mapuche have not been able to communicate this vital experience in these themes so profound. This dialogue raises questions like, who are dialoguing? Who are present here in the dialogue? What experiences are being heard? And how do we interpret those experiences? Even within the culture, there are diverse experiences, which make the dialogue more difficult. Back into the experience of the symposium, we listen to each other from the heart of their meanings, and at the end, all experiences are different, but in this process, we're able to value and appreciate them. The theme of power came across several times as a key and key to a productive dialogue, distinct from domination and imposition. The power that came from the community and is given by the people. The power comes from the community. Fear also comes from power. That something can be taken away. If I share it with you, I relate with something different, with somebody different. As we spoke about diversity, we consider necessary to go from an anthropology of diversity to an anthropology of the complementarity. Like the forest is diverse, this generate life, the new come from diversity, etc. The pueblos originarios keep something that is vital, to conserve the equilibrium and the harmony. With this practice of dialogue, it seems that we are starting to value what is diverse. The idea is not homogenized, and to see the wisdom is found, that the wisdom is also found in the other. As Paul Nitter stated in a conference at the University of Javeriana in Colombia in 2011 about the interreligious dialogue, he said, quote, "We can affirm that the right to recognize the differences has universal base. All the world has the right to be recognized in its unique identity. When we put the accent in unity, we start with the assumption that the entire world has the identical package of right. On the other hand, when we recognize from the difference, we affirm that the entire world has the right that their identity be recognized. This differentiation has been often forgotten, uncovered, and assimilated to identity of the majority or the dominant. In a complex society like ours, the true equality strives in considering that different collectives need different help. Namely, we wouldn't be just if we apply the same treatment to all without having this premise in mind." Close quote. The pueblos originarios have lived subordination, who put them in place of inferiority, as we said before. Considering this subordination experience, we need to facilitate an intercultural process together with the process of decolonization. Again, another another concept that was spoken already. The Church, in this respect, should be able to accompany this process to ensure a truly intercultural dialogue, that in turn participating in its own process of conversion as a church, as individuals, as people. The power of the gospel experience is the power to give life, and as such, to be good stewards, taking care for the neighbor. When we see that God has power, God is to give life to the whole. I have come so you may have life, and life in abundance. Now, these are some questions that we have to keep thinking about, and I will just enumerate them, that it came through this dialogue, this round table. Need to be addressed by theology and anthropology to advance in a more life-giving dialogue. I'm sure that these questions have already been raised in other contexts, which would make them more relevant and urgent today. Diversity is the most natural experience to human. We need to ask constantly, what does it blind us to see what plurality belongs to our human configuration as humanity? We are to accept that in the postmodernity era, there are no securities. Plurality and uncertainty is the rule, and that we are in constant tension. It is the image of equilibrium and stable. We are sojourner. It is a journey with other that we find identity. I am son, I am brother, I am father. We are always identifying ourselves in relationship with the other. Even when we build individuality as community, there is a consciousness that we are with others. The relational and relatedness aspect of life and identity is a paramount to individuality. The individual identity is collective identity, Mapuche people and José for the indigenous people in general. We have experienced that vulnerability is what allows us to relate to others, is that the image that of empty oneself is to experience that kenosis. The experience of Jesus is not an experience of religion per se, but a spiritual experience within the life of humanity, where love and empathy as kenosis was transversal in all aspects of human life. Dios se abaja. This is so important that at the level of intercultural dialogue, lo cotidiano de la vida, as well as the structure of society, culture, and religions itself. We are more aware of the fact that culture is dynamic. It developed by interacting with one another. That encounter had to be genuine and a genuine dialogue that can be transformative and creative to new identity. You continue being Mapuche or Christian, but with new horizons. You can be Christian and Mapuche at the same time, as Isolde said. As church, we need to recover the image of people of God, which as a whole we have not been able to experience as an inclusivity of God's life and creation. The church, or the challenge of interculturality, is also for the church as a structure and also as a theology. The intercultural dialogue is a spiritual process which leads us to transformation, giving a small step to encounter the other. It is a gradual process of growth towards transformation. And finally, intercultural dialogue, it is a sign of the time. It is the spirit that erupts through the diversity in the world and in the cultures. Just two images as a conclusion instead of a long conclusion. One is the inverse asymmetry, where are the powers of the structures, and the idea is how you become, you allow yourself to be in the experience of the other. Put ourselves to the other side. The church must learn the path of kenosis, being more gospel and less religion. And we are temple of the Spirit. We enter into the other experience, and we are in sacred place.
Okay, I'm going to try to translate my own question as well, so I'll say it in English first and then try to do it in Spanish. Okay, so I guess my question was, you talked a lot, both of you talked a lot about this dialogical process and about inviting people into a roundtable discussion. And I was wondering if you could talk about the invitational process before that a little bit more, like how do you invite people into dialogue, and did you experience any resistance either from church leaders or from the indigenous communities, and if so, what was that like? Did you have any outright rejection or just hesitancy, and if so, how do you move forward past that? Entonces la pregunta fue como cuando estás invitando gente al proceso de platicar y sí, de dialogar, como sí, hubo resistencia en el proceso de invitación y cómo superaste eso, si encontraste eso. Okay.
Well, I will respond to that question. Most of the invitations were done
Go to the mic.
Yeah, all people who were invited individually. It was no open invitation. We thought that people who were interested, who had some experience or some struggles even with the experience of church and dialogue and culture and all that. We also invited some people from the church who didn't come. Some pastors that would like to have them there because they were working with a very heavy Mapuche population. Just didn't come. But except one person who was there all the time, a priest. But in general, all of these invitations are one by one. And it's a personal invitation, so we can have a productive dialogue. We can all open to everybody initially. The idea is that later we can open more moments of reflection together. Does it help?
Okay, another question? shy.
That's a good question. One question for you, Jaime. You said something in your talk about how the Mapuches have been forced to kind of have a fundamentalistic approach to their culture. I wonder if you could unpack that phrase a little bit. Do you mean that they have to see their culture as something that is static and unchanging, or what exactly did you mean by that phrase?
Did you translate the question or read it?
Yes, yes.
Okay, go
Yeah, this experience is coming from the elderly and from people who have been more time in the community. They say that they separate more from the church and they come back to their own traditions and experiences, and they focus more in what sustain and give them the identity. So because they have experienced that by going to church, you had to become Catholic without being able to be Mapuches. Not all have the same experience that Isolde had. So for that, there have been a new awareness that what they believe and what they have experienced in their life is good. It's important for them. It's part of their identity. So they had to go back to their sources. So that is a phenomenon that you can see in some of the young people who go to university and they discover themselves and they say, okay, I was baptized, and I'm discovering my own culture, and they really focus on learning more, and they go to the sources, and they try to leave, Christianity or being Catholic, and they go back to their own tradition.
Okay, so you didn't mean it then in terms of what we often mean when we say fundamentalism, but you mean kind of returning to the sources.
Correct.
Okay,
yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we still have time for another question. Yes?
I'd like to direct this to you. We have been experienced with peacemaking circles here in the United States, particularly with regard to race issues and restorative justice issues. The question really focuses on the conclusions. Whenever we do this in the parish or in our communities, the conversation revolves around openness and honesty, and it's very revealing to all of the participants. It lends itself to collaboration. We find individuals in the circles that go out on their own and collaborate in various endeavors, right? But the issue at the end has always been, how do we, or can we encourage the friendship that's necessary to bridge these individual gaps? When we particularly go back to our own communities, to our own cultures, we somehow need to encourage that friendship. Did you experience in Chile, did you have that opportunity to see that? We have used, just quickly, we used Bishop Melchick's pastoral letter here. Bishop Melchick wrote, "Created in God's image." And you said we need to go back to finding God's image. Have you been successful in this experience?
I'm not sure if I've been successful. I think the experience is that creating relationships is very important, and by creating this roundtable and reflections together. All of this reflection is not mine. This is a reflection that we have done together. So it creates a very powerful relationship between people who were not met before. But Isolde invites some people, I invite some people, and others invite others, and so on and so forth. And what happened after that, how those relationships are connected in inviting us, for instance, to the rituals, because we have that relationship already. And that started creating a new kind of relationship with a larger community. For instance, I have been in Guillatun in the religious ceremony, something I had never done before. I have been several times in the last 2 years. So I think that it created a different approach. This is no Mapuche, it's coming and dancing without shoes and dirt. Something is going on here, and that it starts changing from both sides, not just by dialogue, but seeing each other.
So it's really a sharing. It's really a sharing.
The sharing is very
culture that creates that friendship.
Right.
So common.
I think it's great. Thank you.
It's good comment.
Yeah.
Well, Michelle has been there for the last 2 years, accompanying us in this process, so you can share a little bit about that.
Just a quick comment on what has been said. In the meetings that we attended, there was a very impressive presence of some Mapuche leaders who were not necessarily part of the whole dialogue, but in a way they had their blessings. So there was a lot of communication in advance that although the church leaders didn't come, but the Mapuche leaders of the region, of their high level of elders were present to, and on a Catholic university to have these Mapuche ceremonies that they invited us to participate in, and somewhere in the public space, was in a way a breakthrough for the Catholic university, and at the same time it was curious for me to see that the Mapuche leaders were open to the dialogue and supporting it, but there was a lot of fear and reservation from the Catholic leaders. So that's something interesting to reflect on in terms of this dialogue.
So we all know why it's going to happen here.
Yeah,
right.
Okay, everyone is waving. I don't know if she can see that.
She's waving at us.
Turn the camera so she can see people waving. So now you can wave. Now you can wave, huh? There. No, now it's off.
Can I ask a question to her?
You can try, but I don't know if she'll be able to hear.
From where do I stand?
You can just speak. Here, speak to her.
¿Escuchas? ¿Escuchas? Te van a hacer una pregunta.
Okay. My name is Maria Batiste. Maria Batiste, and I would like to ask, what does it mean to be feminist in the church? How you would advise the church to take on a Mapuche feminist view?
¿Escuchaste, Isolde? ¿Escuchaste? Ana, que no responda al question. Can you hear us? ¿Puedes escucharnos? ¿Escuchas? ¿No se escucha? No. No se escucha.
Okay, I think we will draw to a close our session here today. Just stay here. Let's applaud for Jaime. Just one point would be logistics. So we now have lunch, and according to the schedule, we will be coming back here by 1:45. Is that correct? Right? To this room. Okay, so we come back here at 1:45. Lunch is going to be here or third floor?
People take their lunch here and they are free to sit in the AC.
Okay, so just like for breakfast, you can gather your food here and you go to the third floor.
So in the third floor, there's like the drinks. So you can just pick up your lunch boxes here and then go to the third floor for the drinks.
Okay, one other thing I'd like to say before you go. I've been very involved in the areas of interculturality. Okay, she's still talking. All right, there are challenges involved in interculturality. Linguistic, technical, all sorts of things like that. It's a part of the process. But are we ready to enter into that ambiguity and that sort of messiness and the uncomfortable part? That's important. It's important that we bring the Americas together. And it's very important that we do this, huh? So with that comes a patience and practice along the way. So I think we should applaud ourselves and our speakers for that, huh? Okay.